The Pennsylvania Senate race was finally called last week when Democrat Bob Casey conceded. The Democrats were attempting to count ballots that had no date or the wrong date, but luckily the Supreme Court sided with the RNC in this case. So how do we stop these election mishaps from happening? Here to discuss is Cleta Mitchell. She's a senior legal fellow for the Conservative Partnership Institute. So Cleta, what should be the plan to revamp American elections?
Well, hello. Thank you for having me. I've been thinking about this and talking with our election integrity leaders across the country. And I think we're sort of coming to the view that what we need is a voters' election integrity bill of rights because these crazy laws are really infringing on the voting rights of people who go to the polls, do it right, or if you're going to get to vote by mail, that you've signed your name, you date it. But all of this post-election receipt of ballots being dumped. California, I think, is still counting ballots. The idea that they cannot process the ballots before election day, or, look, a lot of states like Florida, like North Carolina, process absentee ballots before election day. All that means is that they make sure that all the requirements are met. And then once the polls close on election day, then they tabulate those ballots. That's what should be the rule everywhere. And we should not have the situation of people sending in ballots 2 weeks, 3 weeks after election day. So I think that there are a number of principles that we're sort of coalescing around that need to be both in federal law and in state law. Only citizens vote. Voter ID for every kind of voting. Make sure that all ballots are received by the time the polls close on election day. Make sure that there's transparency and accountability, that if there are certain kinds of election technology that people are very distrustful of, maybe Congress should appropriate the money like it did after the 2000 presidential election to say, get rid of those things, get rid of those touch screens, get rid of anything that has a modem that can be remotely accessed. Have paper ballots hand marked, and any kind of technology needs to be able to be manually replicated. So you know that the tabulator is counting the number of ballots that are in your hand that were put into the tabulator. We've got to set some principles that are part of the law everywhere. And I think Congress needs to do that, and every state needs to do that. This situation needs to be corrected. It's time. It's way past time to do that.
I think that is such a great idea. I just know so many people in our audience are very much willing to hear those words, grab those principles, and go out and do something because, as you've also been saying on Twitter, you got to do it. Like the voters have to do the work. And if you care about it, you need to take the sort of thing that Cleta and all her people are going to give you and then go out and do it. Let's get a quick update on Illinois, though, because there's a great example of a place where, what is it, up to 14 days, is it there, right, allows mail-in ballots to come in 14 days after the election. Judicial Watch just, is petitioning on this. And do you think that this is something where the Supreme Court or the courts might ultimately decide in the right direction? It seems so egregious, but people are now, they're kind of used to it, right, in our corrupt system, allowing these mail-ins to come in after the fact.
Well, that's an interesting question. And yet you mentioned Judicial Watch has filed suit in both the Illinois and also Mississippi. And the Fifth Circuit ruled that receiving ballots after the time the polls close on election day violates the federal statute that says election day for federal elections, and it says day, is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And so I think that one of the things that we need to do is to say that there's a beginning and an end when we as a country vote pretty much at the same time. And I think part of that would be, we might have to make some accommodation for people to vote in person early if they're going to be out of state. I think we need to get rid of this universal vote by mail, this universal sending of ballots to people, whether they requested them or not. Nevada has that law. There are tens of thousands of bad registrations in Nevada. People out in Nevada, the volunteers have confirmed that the Democrat Secretary of State would not do anything to try to clean the voter rolls. And every one of those people received a ballot sent to that address, whether they asked for it or not, which means you've got all of these ballots just floating around, and there's really no way to oversee the processing, the verification. It's time to stop the nonsense and the madness. So I think that that's got to be one of the principles, this idea of curing ballots. Do you know how many people touch an absentee ballot once it leaves your hand? I think if people had any idea how many people were looking at, interpreting, deciding whether or not to accept, or interpreting how somebody intended to vote, people would not want. That's one of those sausage making things. I think people would say, you know what, I think I'll just go vote in person. But I just think we have to say it is time for all of us as Americans to say our election system is broken. Let us fix it. Yes, we won some races. We lost some races. That's not what this is about. This is about how after 2020, so many thousands of people came out of their homes and started looking at the laws, looking at voter rolls, looking at all these procedures. So now we have tens of thousands of experts, citizen experts. I think it's time that we put that expertise to work and say to the states and to the Congress, do your job, make our elections work properly for everyone. That's what we need to be about the business of doing, I think.
Real quick, yes or no. Is your org going to do look back on 2020 after all the votes are counted this time?
You know, I was talking to some people about that today. A lot of our people have already done look backs. It's just never been pulled together. If anybody, there are a lot of pieces there already that no one's been willing to look at. There are some things like in Fulton County in Georgia, where there were literally hundreds of thousands of ballot images destroyed, which is a violation of state and federal law. So there's some deterioration of the evidence. But sure, I do think that what needs to happen is to pull together all the things that so many people have done, but which the left-wing media, of course, has refused to even consider. There's a lot of good work that is would form the basis of a pretty good look at what happened in 2020.